MC, as I said before, it's really, really easy once you, all right, know all of those rules that we have already acquired in here. Right? I mean, this is where we left off yesterday. Correct? Isn't this kind of what it was? Remember, all the same rules are going to apply. Sometimes they might have a question, or you're going to then be asked which is monopoly and which is MC. Does that make sense? Now you know why? Okay? They both face a downward sloping demand function. Everything's going to be the same. All right? All the rules are the same. Profit maximization is the same. The outcomes are different. Okay? With a monopolist, you don't have any competition. You're the only maker. That's why you have what? A steeper demand function. Does that make sense? There's not as many substitutes. So I've seen questions as simple as that. You know, how can you identify the difference between the demand functions for a from a monopolistically competitive firm and a monopoly firm? Okay, and remember, I told you before, this may not be identified as a demand function. That's how they're going to try and screw you up sometimes. It's only going to be called an AR function. You're going to go, what the crap am I looking at? All right, that's the same as average revenue. I should have showed you that the other day when I put together this little tabular form over here. When we were looking at the marginal revenue function. That sucker's got to go right there. That's going to be halfway along X. All right, your x-intercept's going to be halfway between the origin and your demand function where it intercepts. So that's kind of what you're going to be looking at, some simple stuff like that. All right, so let's get rid of that crap. Okay, my expectation now is you know all of these rules, and you will be able then to identify what the profit is for the monopolistically competitive market. Everybody would be able to do that now. That's all simple stuff. You'd be able to identify some deadweight loss right there. You'd be able to do that. You would be able, you know what deadweight loss is. You know what consumer and producer surplus is. We set you up with all that stuff. All right, now here's going to be the difference. If we were looking at a purely competitive, well, you know what, first of all, can you tell me now, if we were looking at this, I'll try something else here right now. If we were looking at this right now, would you be able to identify where the price would be in a purely competitive market? We did this yesterday when we were looking at monopolies. Virtually, this looks like a monopoly right here. It's just that the demand function isn't quite as inelastic, but it certainly looks like it. So what was a perfectly competitive price when we were looking at monopolies with a downward sloping function? What was it? Where P is equal to what? You know, until you do this, I'm just standing up here and I'm going through it, and I know it's harder for you. Until you actually do the dang thing, and you have some practice, it's going to be a little bit harder, but where would it be? Price equal to what?
MC.
Very good. And where is price when we're looking at this model? It's that demand function, right? Because, right, it's the quantity that we'd be willing and able to purchase at given prices. So that would be the perfectly competitive price, wouldn't it? Right, very good. And you tell me again, is that allocative efficient or is it productive efficient? Yeah, it's the right mix, right? It's the right mix. And then you could obviously identify that on a PPF model. So right away, you can tell me that in monopolistically competitive markets, this is where most of the stuff is made. It's pretty easy to get into. All right, you've got some startup costs, certainly. But we get product differentiation out of it, don't we? And that's going to be really important here in 1 second. Not all the products are the same. You have a little bit of control over price. You can advertise your differences. So do you get prices that are as low as you would if it were perfectly competitive? You don't, do you? Okay. What's the other thing you notice here? There isn't production at minimum ATC, is there? Well, not when you're showing profits, But what about if there was zero economic profit? And what do you think the long-run equilibrium is going to be here? If it's easy to get into in this industry, all right, what do you think the long-run economic profit's going to be for a monopolistically competitive firm?
0.
Yep. And here's the difference though, okay? Look at the question down here on the bottom, okay? If entry is fairly easy, what will happen to the demand for the above firm's product as more makers enter the market? Very good. So we would actually shift that demand function, and the marginal revenue function will shift with it, but we're going to shift that downward, aren't we? Right now you're showing profits. The price, this price that you pay, all right, is above the average total cost of producing that item. You know, and if we had a number here, 5, and if we had 5, and if we had 10, everybody in here right now can tell me what the area of profit is. How much profit are they earning? Producing 5 items, that is the correct quantity, and MR equals MC. What's the total profit? I haven't done a lot of this. I've been going through it so damn fast that I haven't asked you a lot of questions. How much?
25.
25, yep. Okay, so what's going to happen though, and I'll show you here in the long run for MC, you would not see this with monopoly if you're the only maker. Yeah, demand can fall for the product, but you don't have easy entry of other industries. All right, or other companies. Here you have easy entry, don't you? And so the demand function for your product then will shift. I want to show you losses, and I want you to think about this as well. Everybody can see the losses here, can't you? Let's say that this is 5 again, and the price you're receiving is 10, but now the average total cost of producing the dang thing is $15. What are my total losses?
25.
Very good. So now, if you're showing losses, what do you think is going to happen in the industry? Pretty dang easy to get into. You have some product differentiation, but what's going to happen?
Businesses are going to
Pull out.
All right, if businesses leave, let's think about that now. If businesses leave, what will happen to the demand for this firm's product if others leave? It's going to shift to the right, isn't it? So once again, we're getting back to that scenario where the long-run equilibrium in in a monopolistically competitive firm is going to look like this. Right there. Does everybody see that here now? What are we producing now? What kind of profit? The amount that we're producing, what kind of profit are we producing?
Zero economic
profit. All right. Now, there are some issues though here. Okay. What's the first thing that you see compared to perfectly competitive markets? I have faith in you. Yep, the demand curve's downward sloping. What's the next thing? Shows you that the products aren't all identical. What's the next item? What about P? What is it equal to? Is it equal to MC? Is your price equal to MC? No, the marginal cost of producing the item at that quantity is much lower, isn't it? So we're not at allocative efficiency. Now we're at price equal to ATC, zero economic profit, but are we at minimum efficient scale? What is minimum efficient scale again? I have faith in you. I'm losing it fast, but that's fine. I'm optimistic. What is minimum efficient scale? You have to know that term. At the very bottom of the average total cost function. And that is what? Productive efficiency. This is not productive efficiency. It might be zero economic profit, right? $5. And the average total cost of producing the thing is $5. Zero economic profit. Price is $5, average total cost of producing the item is $5, you're making 5 items. Zero economic profit. Don't mess that up now on the test. I've seen kids, you see where I've seen kids screw that up? Yeah, well, gee, we're producing at zero economic profit. That's the long run equilibrium, and then kids, true or false or whatever, this is then allocatively efficient because price is equal to ATC. But not equal to what? It's not equal to minimum ATC. So I think what I'll do is write all those little, things on the board over here today during my prep and whatnot, and then when we finish up on, Tuesday, I'm all done Tuesday, and then it's just, and you guys, I really expect you to start doing all of these practice tests. I think Sween, maybe it's Johnson, I don't know. There was only a couple kids that asked me for the answers now to the first test that I posted. Remember that one I posted before? Who got the answers to it? Just a couple people. That signifies and indicates that you didn't do it. If I did a test, I would want the what?
Answers.
The answers. You will not be successful now if you do not do a lot of tests. Okay, you just gotta trust me. Okay, you gotta trust me. If you wanna do well, you gotta do a lot of practice tests. And then when you get items wrong, all right, you need to find out why you got them wrong. Does that make sense? Maybe you need, now, some of the tests that I'll give you will have explanations for them, some of them will not. And if you don't know how to do it, do you have email? Do you think it would be a good idea to email, send and say, don't know what I'm doing? So what if your teacher set up a CLEP chat room? Would you be afraid to ask a question in the CLEP chat room? Okay.
What about something else besides the chat room? I feel like everyone has great luck with that chat room thing.
Right, but I like efficiency.
That's
I don't want Pop sending me a question and then maybe the Shilster sending me a question and I'm redoing questions for the same people. See, there's this time thing that's really scarce, and I'm an old turd. It's getting more scarce for me, and I'm doing this on my own time. So would it be efficient if we had a CLEP chat room and somebody had a question? Gee, I don't know why I got number 21 wrong. Maybe it's a dang hard question. Do you see how I could answer it for everybody? Mm-hmm. See, that's what kids did in the old day, and that's what we received. Success. Because they weren't afraid to ask a question, and we did thousands of questions for months. Do you think they mastered it? They could write the questions. Now, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just asking you to pass a CLEP test. But I know what success entails. You have to really know why you get it wrong. If you don't know, you better ask. But I don't want to answer individual ones all the time. Does that make sense? Efficiency. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Now and here's a nice comparison of the two. Boy, that sure looks like pure competition here, doesn't it? Pure competition. Any entry, any exit's gonna obviously move that demand function. It's equal to price. There it is. I mean, it's really simple stuff. Now, notice here, look at the term here, efficient scale. We call that minimum efficient scale. So when you compare the two, you're not going to get the same quantity as you would in a purely competitive market, and our price is going to be higher. P is not equal to MC, and it's not equal to minimum ATC. You have neither allocative nor do you have productive efficiency. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. If you run into this terminology right here, excess capacity, and I think you will, it might not be on, it's probably going to be on some of my practice exams. I don't know if it'll be on the CLEP test. Macro men. Okay.
I want you to think about this one. So this is kind of cool stuff. You're going to notice now, if it were purely competitive, we would be at a greater amount, okay? And because you're at the very minimum efficient scale, and I gave you an example here, think of how many restaurants exist where they're not at full capacity. Now remember minimum ATC, if we're producing at that point, okay, does that mean that all of our resources are being used efficiently? All labors are being used efficiently. All machines are being used efficiently. When we were looking at our PPF model, that is productive efficiency. That's where price is equal to the minimum ATC. So would all the restaurants be full? They would. But in a monopolistically competitive environment, because you have product differentiation and you can advertise, all right, that you're better, do we have a lot of restaurants that aren't at full capacity? Absolutely. So my question here, note that firms are not operating at full efficiency. You're not at minimum ATC. Could fewer firms produce efficient scale output if they were at full efficiency? I want you to think about that. So you got a bunch of restaurants that aren't at full capacity, but if we were at full efficiency, would there be even fewer restaurants and they would all be full? But they're not. And that's where we call, all right, we call that excess capacity. And you're able to do that because will people pay more? All right, because you've advertised that your restaurant is better. Mm-hmm. And they're different. So that's why you run into this, what we call markup price, all right, and excess capacity. So I have seen that a couple times on questions. What else can we show you here? That's pretty much it, you guys. You guys know all of this stuff. You know, that's one of the trade-offs you get. In pure competition, you know, all the dang products are the same. So we're going to get a benefit from MC. It's not, the prices aren't going to be as good. The output isn't going to be as efficient, but you're going to get some you know, product differentiation. It's great stuff. So let's get rid of that crap, all right? I do not have to do a lot with oligopoly. I just don't. And that's a beautiful thing for you. Everybody should be so excited to take the CLEP. There are so few questions on oligopoly, but I can tell you where they usually exist. You might have a simple question about those characteristics. It's just a few makers, major barriers to entry. Some of you got this wrong on the quiz. Make sure that you remember. Oh, you guys know your HHI and remember the Herfindahl-Hirschman index? Remember we went over that yesterday? You're just going to square their market share, add it up. That's the Herfindahl-Hirschman. That's something that could be on the test. Absolutely. Something that simple. And if they have the 4-firm concentration ratio, all right, very simple. Just remember now, the other thing here is that in an oligopoly, you can have standardized products or you can have differentiated. This is a very standard product. Okay? Does that make sense? It's hard to get into though, isn't it? Okay? This is hard to get into the industry, but it's very differentiated. So we had some kids that got that little true and false question wrong. And I want to hand those back. Okay, so you know all of this, you know all of this. You know that when you have an oligopoly, you're interdependent. Your choices and what you do will impact others. And then we have to try and look at, well, how is this going to impact me and others? Because it's going to cause movements in the industry. You wouldn't see that in monopolistic competition or peer competition. So we talked about mutual interdependence in here. I think you guys are smart enough now. We use game theory to look at behavior when the group is small. And I think you guys know this. Pricing is based upon the reaction of others. And there are incentives to collude. Okay? There's strong incentives to collude, you guys. But at the same time, are there incentives to cheat? So they're interesting models. The benefit for you, I have never once, and I've gone through a lot of test questions, you will have oligopoly questions regarding dominant strategy and Nash equilibrium, and a Nash equilibrium. You are going to do that. That might be the hardest part and the hardest of your oligopoly questions. So if you still don't understand that, you've got to let me know here, okay? Chances are you're going to run into that again. And maybe as a teacher, you shouldn't show, Bonnie and Clyde. Maybe you should go right down to, an example like this. Maybe that's what we should have done. A lot of kids did not get these correct on the quiz. Hey, how about this, you guys? I'll give you a simple rule. If each individual, and this is a duopoly, remember, if each individual has the same dominant strategy, is it then a Nash equilibrium? Yes, it is. If both individuals, I'm going to say it again, have the same dominant strategy, it will be a Nash equilibrium. Okay? That's the one rule of thumb. They don't have to be, but they certainly can be. So remember, these are, if you're pretending to be Toyota today and I'm Nissan, these are the payoffs relative to my choice of, hey, I'm gonna charge a high price. If you charge high, I charge high, you get 100 bill. If I charge high, you go low, you get 150. So regardless of what I do, what's your best option? Is to go low, isn't it? Okay? Now you're going to notice if I go low and you go high, you get 40. If I go low and you go low, you get 50. What's your best option again?
Low.
It's low. So what is your dominant strategy up here? It's low, isn't it? Now if we reverse this, it's going to be low for me too. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
If you go high and I go high, I get 100. If you go high and I go low, I get 150. I'm going to go low. And we can look at that over here as well. Low is better than high for me. 50 is greater than 40 billion. So what does that tell me right away? I know that each individual's dominant strategy is to go low. This is what they're going to do, aren't they? They're both going to go low when they compete and they act in self-interest. Is there a strong desire to collude? Yes. But if they did that, do you have yourself a Nash equilibrium up here? In order to find the Nash equilibrium, you're going to look at each cell. Is there an incentive to defect for either individual here? There is, isn't there? Right away. Once they collude, I can make 150 billion if I just what?
Cheated.
Yeah, if I cheat. That's why it's really hard sometimes for OPEC. They do collude for their agreement to hold. They can earn more profits. That's what we do. Now, if you guys can do that, you're in good shape. Where's the Nash equilibrium up here on this board? There's no incentive to defect and to change their choice. It's that one. And that's the dominant strategy for both. So you don't have to worry about any of this crap, you guys. All right, the kink demand model, non-collusive, all of this kinkiness, you don't need to know that. You just don't. A price leadership model, if you see anything about a price leadership model, it's just going to be what? It's going to be you follow the leader. The most dominant firm will set the prices and they tend to follow. So we've got all these models for oligopolies, and it's a pain in the ASS when you're doing this with AP. But even when we were studying for the AP test, we just didn't. We just don't run into a lot of questions here, which is in your benefit. It's a pain in the butt when you get into your upper division classes, and then you got to know it inside and out. But so I don't think you're going to see a bunch of that on the CLEP. Okay. Do they produce at at price equal to MC or ATC? Not a chance. Okay. But they achieve economies of scale. Do we tend to see some improvements? Yep, in quality, absolutely, because you have just a few companies in competition, and they're trying to say, what, my product's better, right? So we do see some of that. That's enough of that. I mean, if we run into some problems on our practice questions, I'll certainly look them up for you and share it with you. Okay, now we only have 2 segments left. And notice I have these set up by the chapter, and that brew book is right here. McConnell Brew. If you're ever running into problems, you're saying, crap, I don't know what I'm doing. McConnell Brew is right here. These are the chapters, all right, that I'm covering. And you're going to notice I have the Krugman book as well, which is easier to read. Okay? And I have these Krugman chapters as well. Okay, so it's all set up there for you. So let's go back to our last item here. Okay? It's a little bit harder. What you're doing now, we've always been looking at our supply and demand functions for goods and services. Now what you're doing is you're looking at a demand function for resources. All right, now it's gonna have some of the same characteristics, but it's gonna be a little bit more tricky, okay? So we talk about what derived demand is, and it's really resource demand. So I'll throw an example at you. You know, if there is an increase in the demand for automobiles, will that influence and affect then the market for labor, and how about steel, all of the resources that go into cars? So we're talking about then derived demand. The demand is derived from what? Those products. That's what derived demand is. You might even see a simple question like that. You know, what is derived demand? You got to remember now, there's going to be some easy term questions. DMR, okay, diminishing marginal return, economies of scale. Which one is long run? Which one is short run?
Economies of scale is the wrong one.
Very good. You're going to have some stuff like that. You know, you just have some easy term things. Okay? So make sure that you understand that. You might have something like derived demand. I've seen that before. If you don't know your terms, then you're a little bit screwed here on some of these items. We have an increase in the demand for cars. All right, we're going to have an increase in the demand then for iron ore. The demand for resources is derived, it's a derivative, and you guys love the word derivative. dx dy.
dy dx, actually.
Well, yeah, it is. It's dy dx, isn't it? Yep. Yep, you're right. Okay, that's really what you're doing here. Now, here's what gets a little bit more tricky. Okay. How do we know how many laborers to hire then? Okay, you have to first look at, you know, what does the demand function look like for labor? Right. So we have a theory here. The marginal revenue product function that we're going to look at, it's way over here on the right-hand side, that we're going to hire, and I want you to think about that. Look at this row of students right here, and that's a fine collection of young men. Right? Well, kind of, you know?
You look right at me.
Anyway, so when we look at this fine collection of young men right here, are they all of the same value?